And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's July the 29th, 210th day of the year. Just 155 days remain to the year's over with, and we'll start a new one. On this day in 1958, President Eisenhower signed the act that created NASA. 1981, Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer married at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. In 1954, first part of Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings was published. It's International Tiger Day. Raises global awareness for the wild tiger conservation. National Lipstick Day celebrates the popular cosmetic product. And National Lasagna Day highlights the layered Italian pasta dish. Well, let us see what stories we have in the news today, because there's always something going on. Well, Netanyahu responds to Mandami's threat to have him arrested. He vows to visit New York despite Mandami's repeated calls for his arrest. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made it clear he has no plans to cancel his attendance at the United Nations General Assembly in New York in September, despite Mayor Mandami's repeated calls for his arrest if he shows up in the Big Apple. He said during an interview with Hannity, "I'm going to New York." That was after his White House meeting with President Trump. "I'm going to speak the truth in front of this hate-spewing elected official who is putting one group of New Yorkers against the other. He's turning them against the New York Jews." Mandami has long criticized Netanyahu over alleged atrocities committed by Israeli forces in military campaigns in Gaza and Lebanon. He has no idea what he's talking about, but that's never stopped him before. Recently called Netanyahu a war criminal and the architect of horrific genocide against the Palestinian people. Tens of thousands of Gazans were killed in the war. Has no evidence. He's listening to news stories. While Mandami acknowledged city officials lacked the legal authority to arrest him under International Criminal Court's warrant, the mayor urged federal officials to do so. And it'd be a great grandstand for him if he had him arrested when he shows up in New York City. That would create a international incident, but so what else is new for this man? Netanyahu, in turn, has accused Mandami of fomenting hate and denouncing his rhetoric, saying he's purposely attempting to turn the people of New York against the Jewish population. What are we in the 1930s? What is this? There's so much hate, so many lies, Netanyahu told Sean Hannity. Well, we'll see what Mandami does when Netanyahu shows up. U.S. and Saudi Arabia strike Iran-backed groups in Iraq after a brief pause in the fighting. CENTCOM commander warns troops their videos put U.S. forces in danger. There's going to be confiscation of videos taken by troops. Top U.S. commander in the Middle East is reportedly warning American troops that cell phone videos posted online may be giving Iran critical intelligence about the attacks on U.S. bases. Admiral Brad Cooper, head of the U.S. Central Command, said photos and footage can show Iranian forces where the missiles struck, whether they struck personnel, buildings, or empty ground. Information could help Tehran adjust future attacks, according to the Reuters exclusive report. Well, Fauci's back in the news. According to Comer, Biden's pardon won't shield Fauci if he lies to Congress. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, is warning Dr. Anthony Fauci that his presidential pardon has limits ahead of the former public official's high-profile day on Capitol Hill. Fauci set to testify before a GOP-led Senate panel on Wednesday, days after hundreds of pages of his COVID-19 pandemic-era diary entries were made public. According to what Comer told Fox News Digital, We now know why President Biden gave a blanket pardon to Fauci. While obsessing about his own fame, Dr. Fauci wasn't truthful with the American people about the origins of COVID and advised schools to be closed. He said Americans are still reaping the consequences of Dr. Fauci's actions. Biden's pardon doesn't cover Fauci's testimony this week, and if he continues to lie, he's going to be held accountable. Fauci is among several recipients of controversial preemptive pardons by former President Biden made during the final hours of his Democratic administration. Pardon covers any offenses from January 1st, 2014 through its issue date or anything related to his service as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force or the White House COVID-19 Response Team, or as Chief Medical Advisor to the President. Because the pardon covers conduct during his government service, there would likely be some debate over whether it would protect him from liability stemming from his testimony. We'll see if he tells the truth. I'd be shocked if he does. Well, Newsom's ex-mistress exposes a wild affair step by step, reveals Kamala Harris' advice to stay quiet. Ruby Rippey, the woman whose affair with then Mayor Gavin Newsom sparked a 2007 California political scandal, detailed the encounter step by step in a piece published Tuesday in Vanity Fair, while revealing the role former Vice President Kamala Harris played in advising her afterwards. Rippey, who was married to Newsom's campaign manager at the time, Alex Turk, and who served as the mayor's appointment secretary, disclosed that Harris, who at the time was San Francisco District Attorney, privately advised Rippey to pause and refrain from public comment or taking a book deal as the scandal broke. She listens and says simply, "I wouldn't say anything right now, Ruby. Just pause. More time will give you a better perspective," Rippey claims Harris told her after the affair became public. The essay chronicles Rippey's battles with alcoholism, the eventual breakdown of her marriage, and her journey to sobriety, while questioning how Newsom's team framed the affair in his memoir. Rippey notes that Newsom's book wrongly claims he was the one who came clean to her husband. The detail, she says, gives him credit for a confession she'd already made. When she asks a Newsom advisor if the governor tells the truth in the book, he responds, "Well, we all remember things differently, don't we?" Rippey describes beginning the affair while working at City Hall, detailing encounters that included sitting in a hot tub together, spending nights in hotel rooms, advising and visiting his Russian Hill penthouse. Oh yes, Newsom was quite the man. Well, Trace Adkins survived an ex-wife's kill shot after the bullet passed through the heart and the lungs. He's going into detail about how he survived a kill shot from one of his ex-wives. In a recent appearance on this past weekend with 3L Vaughn, a podcast, the 64-year-old country singer dismissed his 4 marriages and how one of his exes took it a little bit far when asking him to leave and shot him. She was mad. She wanted me to leave. I wasn't going to leave, so that's how it went down. Put it under my left arm, and the bullet came out under my right arm. He didn't want her to share she was holding the gun and preparing to fire it. He approached her with his hand out, asking her to give him the gun when she fired the shot. When asked what it felt like to be shot, he explained his opinion: when the situation's that serious, your body protects you. You just go into shock, adding he doesn't remember feeling anything. I just remember getting up off the floor and taking a few steps and going back down, and that's all I remember. Went under his arm and came out his arm. So it went straight through his heart and both his lungs. It was a kill shot, but he did not die. Well, the battle to replace late House Democrat goes to overtime after his daughter failed to clinch the seat. 2 Democratic candidates locked in a race to fill the seat left by the late Representative David Scott, Democrat of Georgia, advanced to a runoff election on Tuesday evening after failing to capture 51% of the vote. Winner of the election will add another Democratic seat in a narrowly divided House of Representatives. Republicans hold 218 seats and Democrats hold 212. Adding even one more Democrat member puts increased pressure on the Republicans to remain united on party line legislation. Marcy Scott, the daughter of the late David Scott, and Everton Blair, chair of the Gwinnett County School Board, to face off against each other in a runoff to represent the Peach State's 13th Congressional District on August 25th. Well, if you're interested in justice in Georgia, I got a book I recommend you read. It's called Why Would They Say It If It Wasn't True? It's about some of the shenanigans that Democratic officials got into and regarding an issue involving me. You can get it on Amazon. Go to Kindle, look up Ken Hudnall. Well, body cam shows Tony Romo arguing with an officer before refusing a breath test during a DUI arrest. Tony Romo questioned police during his July 23rd operating while intoxicated arrest in Wisconsin. According to newly released police body cam footage obtained by Fox News, former Dallas Cowboy quarterback told the officer he was coming from a golf course and insisted he consumed 0 drinks before asking to call his attorney. When asked to step out of the vehicle, Romo responded, "Because I'm coming off from a golf course, you think I'm drunk?" Police detained Romo and transported him to a nearby station to conduct a field sobriety test. The arresting officer said she observed red, glassy eyes and smelled alcohol coming off Romo. After completing the test, Romo refused to take a breath test, telling the officer, "I've heard from all the lawyers don't ever do that." Romo was cited for first offense operating while intoxicated and refusing to submit to a chemical test. He's released and due in court September 21st. Well, it's been my experience. Quite often, officers on stops like this, their ego gets involved. I had an incident with an officer who said I was speeding. And I said, "Well, can I see the results of the radar?" Which, according to law, I'm entitled to see. He said, "Well, I don't have a radar gun. It's my training and experience that told me how fast you were going." So we get to the court hearing, and he could barely read the screen of the computer. I asked for a jury trial, and that totally confused everybody. Dating's new red flag. Voting the wrong way could leave you single for good. Somewhere along the way, swipe right if you're 5 foot 10 inches or taller, turned into swipe left if you didn't vote the way I wanted. I don't know exactly when the dating profile became a place to list your positions on foreign policy, but if you've opened Hinge or Bumble in any major city lately, you already know what I'm talking about at the moment. Scroll through profiles in New York City, D.C., or L.A., and you see it instantly. It's not just one side of the dating pool. Before she tells you her job or what she's looking for, she's already told her pronouns, and there's a Palestinian flag next to no fascist, and somewhere in there, usually bolded, is some version of "if you voted for Trump, don't bother." Well, Trump derangement syndrome is certainly a major issue even today. GOP governor survives a challenge from Bitcoin evangelist in a gubernatorial runoff. South Dakota Governor Larry Roden fended off a primary challenge from businessman and Bitcoin evangelist Toby Doden on Tuesday, winning the first gubernatorial primary runoff in state history and advancing to the November general election. The Associated Press called the race for Roden within minutes of final polls closing. He got 70.5% of the vote compared to Doden's 29.5% at the time it was called. With approximately 25% of the expected vote counted. The election marked the first time South Dakota voters were asked to settle a gubernatorial nomination to a primary runoff. State law requires a runoff between two leading candidates when no contender for governor, U.S. Senator, or U.S. House receives at least 35% of the primary vote. With a head-to-head contest followed a four-way June primary in which Doden finished first with 30.6% of the vote and Roden finished second with 25.2%, leaving both short of the 35% needed to score the nomination outright. Rowe became governor in early 2025 after Kristi Noem left to join the Trump administration, while Doden entered the race as a businessman and political newcomer. Doden also built a public profile as a Bitcoin evangelist. Said he began investing very, very heavily in the cryptocurrency around 2020 after devoting roughly 500 hours to researching it, eventually converting nearly all the cash reserves from his companies that he didn't expect to need into Bitcoin. Well, that may or may not have been a good idea. The jury's still out on that. Well, Costco shoppers may be eligible for a large payout after a multi-million-dollar email settlement. Washington residents who received certain Costco promotional emails between 2021 and 2026 can file a claim before the August 24th deadline. Costco shoppers in Washington may be eligible to receive a cash payout after the retailer agreed to settle a class action lawsuit accusing the retailer of sending misleading promotional emails advertising limited time offers. Lawsuit alleges Costco violated Washington's Commercial Electronic Mail Act, which regulates commercial email marketing. Under the CMA, recipients may receive up to $500 per qualifying email, but the actual payout from the settlement is currently unknown and is going to depend on the number of valid claims that are submitted. While denying any wrongdoing, Costco agreed to pay $14 million to settle the lawsuit. Allen versus Costco, Wholesale Corp. Well, we'll see what comes of that. There's a lot of similar suits that have come to settlement. You're always seeing things on the internet. See if you qualify for this payout. Lindsay Clancy's ex-husband details of pill use as experts say evidence could shape the murder trial. Prosecutors appear to begin chipping away at the defense's portrayal of Lindsay Clancy as over-medicated, walking jurors through 9 prescription bottles still contained many of the pills she'd been given. Patrick Clancy testified Monday his ex-wife had been prescribed numerous psychiatric medications in the months before the deaths of their 3 young children. But under questioning from Assistant District Attorney Shannon Buckingham, he acknowledged that several prescriptions had only been partially used. So there are a lot of pills prescribed, not a lot of pills taken, correct? Buckingham asked, holding up a bag of prescription medications. Patrick responded, "Is that comprehensive of all the pills that were prescribed?" "These are the pills you brought to the police station," Buckingham said. "So out of these," and he said, "out of those, yeah, it's possible that's not a lot we're taking." Buckingham also sought to distinguish between the total number of medications prescribed over several months and how many Lindsay was prescribed at one time. And supposedly under the influence of this medication, she killed her 3 children. Jury's going to have a hard time believing that, I would suspect. Dakota Johnson stuns as Marilyn Monroe in the first look after director doubted the casting. Well, Dakota Johnson looked every bit the blonde bombshell she transformed into Marilyn Monroe. A new set photo offered fans a first glimpse at Johnson's striking new role in a film called Flesh Impact. Short film written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal will premiere at the Venice Film Festival in September. Shocking transformation is one piece of Gyllenhaal's fresh take on the Hollywood legend. Instead of a traditional biopic, Flesh Impact imagines Monroe beyond the platinum hair and red lipstick, exploring the woman behind one of pop culture's most enduring personas. Gyllenhaal first worried Johnson didn't look enough like Marilyn Monroe to play the part, and she thought that's ridiculous. Who cares? In an interview with Vanity Fair, she said, "I don't know that anybody ever really knows what Marilyn looks like because she's been so commodified, made into this myth, and she's way blurry in my mind." Well, we'll see what comes out of that casting. The Nolan Wells mystery deepens as email indicates the teen drank heavily before vanishing. The mysterious death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells has taking another turn after a newly obtained document lists the missing team's alcohol intake as heavy as authorities searched for him on Horn Island on the 4th of July weekend. The document, a July 5th Mississippi Department of Marine Resources Marine Patrol email obtained by Fox News, was sent to the U.S. Coast Guard as authorities searched for Wells. Along with his physical description and last known location, the email lists alcohol intake heavy, but doesn't identify the source of that information. Wells disappeared while on a boating trip to Horn Island with friends. An extensive multi-agency search ended July 6th when his body was discovered. Authorities haven't publicly identified a cause or manner of death, and the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's autopsy and toxicology results remain pending. Well, Wisconsin brewery that offered free beer when President Trump dies says its alcohol permit's been revoked. Well, the Wisconsin brewery, known for anti-Trump social media posts, including one promising free beer promotion upon the death of President Trump, has had its permit to operate in that state revoked by state officials. The Milwaukee State Journal, Sentinel, reported Monday that liberal activist and brewery owner Kirk Bankstad is vowing to fight tooth and nail after getting a letter from the state's Department of Revenue revoking Minnequa's Brewing Company's permit to operate in Wisconsin. This is according to July 26 newsletter sent to his supporters. As you can imagine, I'm not taking this lying down, he wrote in a Substack post on Sunday. We're going to fight the state of Wisconsin both tooth and nail, and once again, I'll have to pay me out of my tap rooms before I stop selling beer to thirsty progressives who come to visit us. Well, that shows Trump derangement syndrome is alive and well. Marcus Mumford says Bible camp sparked a decades-long love story with life Carey Mulligan. Before the two became one of Hollywood's most private couples, there were just two kids that met at Bible camp. The Mumford and Sons frontman recalled on Smartless podcast how a chance childhood meeting eventually blossomed into romance years later after the pair reconnected as adults. Future couple first crossed paths at a church Bible camp when Mumford was 10 and Mulligan was 12, became pen pals. And she still has a journal entry from the day they met when he said his cousin was there, was 2 years older, who was age appropriate for her. And he got an 8.5 out of 10, but Mumford himself, it was definitely not underlying boyfriend material, got 9 out of 10. Flattering review didn't spark an instant romance, but it planted the seed for a relationship that could take years to come together. He recalled the two stayed in touch as kids before reconnecting in their 20s and on Facebook. Mulligan bought a ticket to Laura Marling's show years later, where Mumford and Sons was also performing. Well, the strangest things can start a relationship. A murdered 9-year-old begged not to go on a trip with the father months before he allegedly killed her, the mother testifies. The mother of 9-year-old Melina Fratolin testified Tuesday her daughter didn't want to travel overseas with her father months before prosecutors say he killed the girl during a summer trip to New York. Kelly Galanis told jurors in Essex County Court that her ex-partner, Luciano Fratolin, wanted to take Melina to his native Ethiopia for 2 weeks in January 2025. But Galanis said the trip never happened after her daughter objected. She didn't want to go. Adding the mother also became increasingly uneasy about that proposed trip. Strange things can happen. And in this particular case, it did. Well, we're going to talk today about some cover-ups. Have you ever heard about the Babylonian Brotherhood? If you remember the science fiction TV series V, where reptilian humanoids took over the Earth, David Icke, of course, does. According to the New Age guru and conspiracist, 12-foot lizards from the planet Draco have colonized the Earth, both above and below the ground, and organized into the Babylonian Brotherhood. And they rule it through global elites such as the Illuminati and the Bilderberg group. The Babylonian Brotherhood are externally convincing as humans, but the reptilian humanoid DNA courses through the veins of the world's rulers. In fact, it's precisely this hybrid genetic plus which gives them the necessary attributes for ruling the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the British royal family. The ruling political and economic families of the U.S. and the rest of the world come from this same bloodline, reptilian and mammalian DNA. In such books he's written, such as The Biggest Secret in 1999, Children of the Matrix in 2001, Ike's assiduously tracked the doings of the Brotherhood and their human supporters as they seek to gain the tighter control over the world. The Brotherhood's modus operandi is, according to Icky, the problem reaction solution, where the Brotherhood perpetuates some outrage, such as 9/11 or the Oklahoma City bombing, so the public clamors for a policy change, which of course is exactly what the Brotherhood wants to happen. Icky shares some of the same political bed as the armed American militias, who likewise identify the New World Order project as the source of all modern evil. On occasion, Icky's addressed U.S. patriot groups, where Icky and the militias part companies on the Jewish question. The militias are violently anti-Semitic. Icky's not. The Brotherhood's not a Jewish plot, he told the British journalist John Ronson in Ronson's book, Them, in 2001. Traveled Icky and his entourage. Ronson, a Jew, found little evidence of race hatred. The suggestion that humanoid reptilians rule the earth is not Icky's first visit to the furthest shore of the imagination. Born in Leicester, England in 1952, Icky is originally a professional footballer, playing for Coventry and Hereford, before arthritis forced to change a career to sports reporting for the BBC. And outside the studio, became increasingly involved with politics, first with the Liberal Democrats and then with the Green Party. During a session of spiritual healing in 1990 for arthritis, that messages from master souls and extraterrestrials reached him, informing him that he was the Son of God. He said, "I'm a channel for the Christ Spirit. The truth is given to me recently by the Godhead," he said at the time. Dressed appropriately in turquoise, claiming to be the risen Christ, he became a figure of such national fun he had to go and hide for a few years. Reemerging as the clarion sounder against the Brotherhood, he's a fluent, persuasive, telegenic communicator, a natural politician, which does give rise to a dreaded possibility. If he's so gifted a leader, might he be a lizard disguised as a human himself? I'd refer you, if you want more information, to The Biggest Secret, published in 1999, and Children of the Matrix, published in 2001, and Ronson's book, Them, Adventures Among Extremists, in 2001. They are definitely interesting reading. Well, the next cover-up involves barcodes. Now, for most people, barcodes are the handy black and white stripes on products that facilitate quick payment at the store. Instead of the assistant keying in the price, the item is swiped over red laser lights that read it off. For the shopkeeper, barcodes have the advantage of that swiping the barcode allows instant stock control. Well, for those that are in favor of barcodes, they need to read the 1982 book, The New Money System, 666, by Mary Stuart Ralphie. Ralphie's divined that barcodes have satanic importance. The guard bars on the code indicate 666, the mark of the devil and its cashless economy. You can see references to it in Revelations, chapter 13, verses 16 through 18. And he calls us all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand on their foreheads. And no man might buy or sell, save he has that mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, which the number of a man is number 666. David Icke, who tracks the doings of the Babylonian Brotherhood, as I said in the last segment, is another to have a problem with barcodes because they enable mass observation. Everything you buy with a credit or debit card can be put against your name. And soon the government and the backroom cabal that runs it will know exactly what's in your home. Well, many folks say Ike might be a nut, but it might be right. The trend of the era is toward microscopic surveillance of citizens' consumer habits. 2005, the BBC reported that the Tesco supermarket chain had trialed radio frequency identification chips, which allows products to be tracked through radio waves. Privacy groups call these chips spy chips because the tags can be used to track the behavior of customers. And there is clearly a need for citizens to watch out for what big business and governments are up to. The devil, though, is not in the detail for the UPC or the EAN barcodes used in American and European products, respectively. If you want to know more about this particular topic, I refer you to Mary Stuart Alfie's The New Money System, 666, which came out in 1982. Well, let's talk about the BCCI, the Bank of Commerce and Credit International. According to President James Garfield, and one of the few things he's remembered for, whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And that's true. It used to be called usury. These days it's called changing interest on loans, and it's the reason for those ubiquitous institutions we know as banks. Since the 17th century, banks have loaned money to nations and companies as well as to individuals, and they've been charged with manipulation of national and international affairs. According to the True Conspiracies website, the following, among other sins, can be laid at the reinforced doors of the banks. Boom and bust cycles, along with the depressions and stock market crashes and wars, are deliberately caused to make people lose money to the conspirators. They also weaken the people and tame governments into accepting as conspirator solutions. The conspirators, of course, are the secret societies that operate in the background. History books controlled by the conspiracy don't tell the full truth on why many events happen. For example, the conspirators blamed slavery for the American Civil War, but the real reason was to establish a central bank in the U.S. and force a war to enable them to lend money at high interest rates. Conspirators bribe members of the government by paying them and having them work for the bank. Intense deceptive media publicly convince the public and politicians of the benefits of the Federal Reserve Act, done in ways such as by lying and saying the banks will reduce boom and bust cycles. So the Federal Reserve Act was passed near Christmas when few people were present to vote against it. It was funded by the U.S. and Britain to create a bigger war. U.S. government, controlled by the banker conspiracy, wanted Hitler to invade America, but he declined due to the risk of the number of Americans that had guns. U.S. government also encouraged Japan to invade Pearl Harbor, get America into the war. And I do know that FDR wanted very much to get involved on the British side, but the American public wasn't going to have it until Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The bankers funded Arab and Japanese companies to buy up property around the world so the bankers could get more control of it. Manipulation of agriculture has and will be used to force the population to accept the conspirators' demands, such as having to surrender guns to get food. The U.S. deliberately tried to lose the Korean and Vietnam War so the communists would remain in with the territory. Having been on the outskirts of the Vietnam War, I don't think we tried to lose that one. But when the suits decided to run it, that's when we really started having major issues. The one involved with the conspiracy since his initial rise to power, President Kennedy was killed by an agent of the conspiracy for wanting to pull out of Vietnam and printing the silver currency. A lot of countries, now with conflicts, had peace until the influence of international bankers' conspiracy. The collapse of the Soviet Union was a hoax to fool the world into a false sense of security and also to slowly cause the world to accept communism. And we've seen the examples of that with Mondami in New York City. A socialist is one step from a communist, according to what many people say. The bankers funded the Soviet Union to create an arms race, which cost time and money. Also caused the nations to gladly surrender their arms in the name of peace, so the goal of a one-world army could be formed under control of the United Nations. In World War II, the U.S. and British governments controlled by the bankers succeeded in getting the Soviet Union to control much of Eastern Europe. And they can control the weather for biological warfare. They're deliberately ruining the environment to gain more control. And I've had many people tell me that. And there's plenty more where that came from. In the fevered minds of some conspiracy theorists, the banks are run by a cabal of families, principally the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Loebs, and the Rockefellers. They hammer out their joint policy in the Bilderberg group and implement said policy through various front organizations. The Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank all hold a special place in the hearts of the conspiracy theorists as a business-centered international banking conspiracy. And the end goal of that conspiracy is, of course, what's known as the New World Order. A distinct flaw in international banking conspiracy theory is that the national banks continue to operate with patriotic bias. Bank of England still promotes British interests above all others. The Bundesbank acts resolutely in favor of German strategy, which, according to some on the British left, is a conspiracy to run Europe from Berlin. Sort of soft-gloved Third Reich. Then there's that nasty sheen of anti-Semitism over much of the banking conspiracy theory. Just as it had in the 1930s when Adolf Hitler blamed Jew financiers for the world's woes, principally Bolshevism. 60 years later, it's still the Jews who destroyed Christian old-line companies who want Islamic-owned companies excluded from Dow Jones, live on the labor of others, according to international site Jew Watch. It's not difficult to debunk the anti-Semitic fantasy. It takes just one name. The name of J.P. Morgan, the super banker who was a white Christian. Take out the anti-Semitism and the puppet and string notion of politics, and the conspiracy raise legitimate concerns about the most powerful of financial institutions. Banks are one of the globalizing forces seeking to innovate the nation state, and banks do discuss mutual interest in elite forums such as Bilderberg, Le Cercle, and the Trilateral Commission. The International Monetary Fund does operate in a worldwide capitalist interest, as numerous left-wing regimes have discovered and are obliged to alter their internal economies to return for aid. Sometimes banks are immoral. The Vatican Bank allegedly laundered money for the mafia. The Banco Nacional del Lavoro funded illegal arms purchases. Barclays underpinned the apartheid regime of South Africa before with breathtaking hypocrisy, funding the black dictatorship of Mugabe in Zimbabwe. For sure criminality, though, the Bank of Commerce and Credit International remains unsurpassed. The sorry tale of BCCI is also one that ties in some of the biggest names of the late 20th century, among them George W. Bush, Henry Kissinger, and Osama bin Laden. BCCI was founded in 1972 by the Pakistani banker Aga Hassan Abidi with an initial chest of 2.5 million pounds, and an astute piece of marketing proclaimed itself the Third World Bank with a mission to promote prosperity in the corners of the globe the Western banks ignored. Within a decade, it had 1 million depositors and was working its way to a paper value of $25 billion. Despite its Third World Bank tag, though, it was keen to break into North America, where in 1977 it bought 4 banks, including the First American Bank. BCCI's vigorous asset buying hid the bank's true financial status. It was verging on insolvency, and much of whatever money BCCI was making was coming from illegal activities. By the mid-1980s, the CIA, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Drug Enforcement Agency were respectively informing the U.S. State, Treasury, and Justice Departments BCCI was laundering drug money. And these alarms were all ignored, of course, possibly because some branches of the CIA itself were using BCCI for clandestine purposes. In 1987, when President Manuel Noriega of Panama was discovered to be among those using BCCI to launder drug money. That lid can no longer be Capone. U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Terrorism, Narcotics, and International Operations launched an investigation into BCC under Senator John. I get to fly my own private jet, Kerry. When Kerry eventually delivered his report on the BCCI affair to the Committee on Foreign Relations, U.S. Senate, in December 1992, he recorded a catalog of larceny by BCCI that ranged from narcotics trafficking to money laundering. And such a catalog of criminality would, you might presume, have the U.S. administration champing at the bit to close BCCI down. Well, that was not the case. This is where the allegation of conspiracy enters. One of the companies which borrowed money from BCCI, Harkin Energy, had on its board of directors George W. Bush, U.S. President's son. BCCI lobbyists and advisors included Henry Kissinger's consultancy, Kissinger Associates. The CIA, while denouncing BCCI on the one hand, was floating in and out of BCCI, according to Kerry. On the other, was possibly using the bank to run funds to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and was definitely working to some unspecified end through the BCCI's affiliate Capcom. And even Jimmy the Peanut Man Carter and the Rainbow Coalition leader Jesse Jackson were receivers of BCCI's largesse. In other words, a vast number of U.S. luminaries had a vested interest in halting Kerry's work, which is exactly what happened in 1989 when the Justice Department stalled his investigation. According to Washington Monthly, personal pressure from no less than Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis was put on Kerry to stop his actions. To Kerry's credit, he refused to give up completely and approached New York District Attorney Robert Morgenthau with irrefutable evidence BCCI was handling the accounts of the Colombian Medellin cartels and diverting funds to the terrorist Abu Nidal. In 1990, the Bush administration gave BCCI a rap over the knuckles but refused to close the bank down. That task eventually fell to the Bank of England in July 1991. Although the publication of Kerry's report, now co-authored by Senator Hank Brown in the following year, administered the coup de grace, BCCI was indicted for money laundering, bribery, and grand larceny. Well, shutting the doors of BCCI didn't prevent $13 billion from going missing. Not that any of the monies went to the bank's staff or small investors, the latter quaking fruitlessly to retrieve their deposits from the BCCI branches. No answers as to where the missing money went, although there are hints that some of the bank's and business clients got larger than usual remunerations in the run-up to the collapse. An investigation by the French intelligence service found that one Osama bin Laden was a BCCI customer. It's within the bounds of possibility bin Laden was among those who benefited in the last days of the BCCI criminal empire. If you want to read more about it, Jay Beatty and S.C. Gwynn wrote a book called The Outlaw Bank, A Wild Ride in the Secret Heart of BCCI from 1993. And then, of course, Senator John Kerry and Senator Hank Brown wrote the BCCI affair report to the Committee on Foreign Relations. That was from 1992. And Peter Truell and Larry Gerwin wrote False Prophets, the Inside Story of BCCI in 1992. Well, it's interesting to note that depending on your political persuasion, some of the initial biggest distractors to BCCI became its strongest supporters. Politics creates strange bedfellows, don't you know? Well, let's talk about the Bilderberg Group. Problem of being rich and powerful and influential these days is that ordinary people just don't understand you. It's only other rich, powerful, influential people to whom you can really relate, spend quality time with. So along with the invitation to party on down at the Bohemian Grove comes membership of a very exclusive, no-holds-barred talking group, the Bilderberg Group. The group's meetings take place once a year at a luxurious hotel somewhere nice, safe, civilized, and very secret. Steering committee of around 20 members draws up a list of 100 people they think reflect the great and the good, one or two up-and-coming politicians or business people, and even the the odd NGO representative if it seems to make economic sense. And once gathered, the chosen ones are catered by hand-picked chefs, have the venue checked by the CIA, and are guarded by mercenaries. These, though, are all the details that we have about the operation of the Bilderberg Group. As soon as delegates sit down together, the media blackout begins. Nobody talks about what's been discussed at the group's meetings. No details are leaked. No paparazzi stalk the place with their long lenses. So the kind of privacy any royal or celebrity would kill for is accorded to an innocent group of concerned and informed individuals chatting about new directions in world politics and business. If that sounds strange to you, a lot of other people think so. The group is distrusted by the ultra-right, who believe it's part of a Zionist plot to rule the world. The far left deeply distrusts its capitalist credentials. Hardline conspiracy theorists claim the Bilderberg Group has caused wars and recessions, ordered murders, ousted leaders such as JFK and Margaret Thatcher, and dictated national policies. Unsurprisingly, the group is also accused of having the achievement of the New World Order at the top of its secret agenda. Promotion of free trade and elimination of protectionist policies are the first steps in its dastardly plan to undermine individual nationality, followed by a series of international conflicts that would destabilize national boundaries still further and reward its acolytes with bulging profits, such as lucrative Iraqi reconstruction contracts, which went to a lot of people that the only thing they know about building would be getting a set of Tinker Toys out and sitting on the living room floor. The list of ready believers in this conspiracy include Osama bin Laden, Timothy McVeigh, the perpetrator of the Oklahoma City bombings, convicted London mail bomber David Copeland, and all apparently convinced that Bilderberg pulls government strings. The guest list for meetings certainly includes names weighty enough to set any sensitive terrorist paranoid antenna vibrating. George W. Bush and his neoconservative cohorts, Colin Powell and Richard Armitage and Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz, quantum president of the World Bank, Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, Warren Healy, Henry Kissinger, and the conspiracy theorist favorite David Rockefeller have all been invited to Bilderberg meetings. 130 invitees are drawn from North America, the rest from Europe. Well over half being from the business, media, and educational worlds. The rest are politicians or even royalty. The Queen of the Netherlands and the Crown Prince of the Belgians have both attended, as have more unlikely candidates such as Jonathan Porritt from Friends of the Earth. No suggestion that Prince Charles has joined the club yet, but as King George did, he might. King Charles. King George. Members of the Bilderberg Group stress that it's only a upmarket talking shop. Hard to believe that members don't influence each other, as the guest list is not manipulated to put the right people together. Will Hutton, editor of The Economist, Nelson ex-Bilderberger, came close to breaking a self-imposed code of silence when he likened Bilderberg to the World Economic Forum, where the consensus established is the backdrop against which policy is made worldwide. Well, if Hutton's correct, then the group will have surpassed its creator's intentions. The original aim was to bring America and the United Europe closer together in the face of the emerging threat of Stalin's Soviet Union and post-war anti-American feeling. First meeting was masterminded by one Joseph Rettinger, Polish-American with contacts in the top ranks of government and military. He believed peace was too important to be left to democratic means and was best brokered by powerful multinational organizations. The chosen group was met in May of 1954 at the Hotel de Bilderberg in Oosterbeek, near Anaheim. It was hosted by former SS officer Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Since then, it's met annually and occasionally twice a year to encourage transatlantic cooperation, always with the CIA on hand to handle security. That's a guarantee to get any conspiracy theorist blood racing. And sheltered from prying eyes by a self-imposed ban by the world's media, newspaper editors and media moguls are also invited to attend. It's this need for absolute privacy that seems to stick in the throats of Bilderberg critics. Tony Gosling, a former journalist and organizer of an anti-Bilderberg website, puts his fears very simply. My main problem is the secrecy. When so many people with so much power get together in one place, I think we are owed an explanation of what's going on. One of the first places I heard about the determination of the U.S. forces to attack Iraq was from leaks that came out of the 2002 Bilderberg meeting. Well, according to conspiracy theory students David Southwell and Sean Twist, the way the secret is maintained also suggests there's more than a polite discussion of current affairs going on behind those closed doors. They cite the occasion of the 2003 Bilderberg meeting in Versailles, which almost coincided with the beginning of a Group of 7 meeting of finance ministers nearby Paris. Well, the proximity of those two events made local French security police uneasy, and they tried to have the Bilderberg meeting canceled. Someone in the force even went so far as to leak an internal memo complaining of the large number of mercenaries being used to protect members. And they believed the event was merely a front for something much more sinister. On the other hand, defenders of the group would say that in the face of often biased reporting from the world's press, business leaders and politicians have much to gain from being able to voice opinions freely without the risk of their views being taken out of context. And it's this honesty which allows a greater understanding of political situations to be reached. Financial Times journalist Martin Wolf supports that view. It's privacy rather than secrecy that's key to such a meeting. The idea that such meetings can't be held in private is fundamentally totalitarian. It's not an executive body. No decisions are being made there. Is the average citizen to assume then that all that's happening at the Bilderberg meeting is talk with no action? Well, some credit the group with responsibility for the creation of the Treaty of Rome in 1957. Only 8 months earlier, the group's 1955 meeting concluded there was a pressing need for a closely knit European market. Others say the 1996 delegation, which included Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, Helmut Kohl, Henry Kissinger, and Margaret Thatcher, plotted a war in Kosovo that would eventually bring down Serbia's Slobodan Milosevic, a view apparently broadcast by Serbian news agency at the time. On other occasions, it would appear that mere invitations have to set a train of events in motion. Bill Clinton was brought to the 1991 meeting in Germany when governor of Arkansas. 2 years later, he was U.S. president. He's my cousin, and they never offered me a job. Tony Blair got his call to address the meeting in 1993. Good talent spotting on the part of the Bilderberg Committee, or a cynical boost to those politicians whose views are friendly to big business. As the machination of multinational boardrooms remains beyond the realm of public interest, there's no way of telling what effect the group's meetings have had on the business and financial worlds. Company directors are not democratically elected and are accountable only to their shareholders. But the same can't be said of politicians who count themselves as Bilderbergers. These people are democratic leaders of the Western world, accountable to millions of people and supposedly upholders of free speech and open government. So why then would they need to discuss major issues off the record? The answer may lie in the very economic system they claim is integral to democracy. As conspiracy theory journalist Alasdair Spark says, the idea that a shadowy clique is running the world is nothing new. Shouldn't we expect that the rich and powerful organize things in their own interest? It's actually called capitalism. Well, if you want to read more, read Brian Kozer's book, Free Agent. He came out with it in 1993. Or Robert Ehringer's The Global Manipulators, 1980. Well, there's a lot of information available on the internet about Bilderberg Group and some of the members. This next story, I've seen people get totally paranoid about it. I'm talking about black helicopters. These are sinister, silent black helicopters are used for the surveillance of patriotic groups supposed to take over the U.S. by the United Nations, according to the New World Order of the other foreign powers. That's according to claims by the late Jim Keith in his celebrated books, Black Helicopters Over America, Strike Force for the New World Order, and Black Helicopters 2, The Endgame, Strategy. He went alone in believing the U.S. government would use military aircraft for surveillance of Blackwoods patriots. A militia in Montana tried to shoot down a National Guard AH-64 helicopters that flew over a member's ranch. Congresswoman Helen Chenoweth of Idaho publicly charged that federal agents of black helicopters are harassing Idaho ranchers, although in her version, the helicopters are implementing the Endangered Species Act for the federal government. Ranchers seem a popular visiting place for the black helicopters. The first sightings in the 1970s were associated with cattle mutilations by aliens. Extraterrestrial technology from back engineered at Area 51 is believed by some ultra-patriots to be used in the making of these black helicopters. And there's no doubt that the military and law enforcement agencies of the U.S. do use black helicopters, as the Black Hawk Down Special Forces fiasco in Somalia reminded the entire world. Indeed, the stealthy UH-60 Black Hawk perfectly fits the black helicopter bill, except it's not employed by the UN as a takeover bid in the land of the free. Used by the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency for narcotics busting, maybe, by the CIA and surveillance of the Midwestern militias, and by the UN of the New World Order as well. Keys claim that vast garrisons of UN troops, up to 20,000 strong, are already established in America, along with their matte black helicopters, might seem alarming, were it not for the fact that nobody but Keith and a handful of far-right paranoics has ever seen them. And even in the wide-open spaces of the U.S., 20,000 commie-leaning, blue-hatted UN troops are kind of hard to conceal. Well, if you want to know more about the black helicopters, you need to read both of Jim Keith's books. The 1994 book was Black Helicopters Over America, Strike Force for the New World Order. And in 1998, he came out with Black Helicopters 2, The Endgame Strategy. It does make interesting reading. And finally, we have the Bohemian Grove, occupying 2,712 acres of ancient redwood forest near Monte Rio in Sonoma County, California. The Bohemian Grove is a private camping site for an annual 2-week gathering of 2,000 or so of America's great and their guests. It's run by the San Francisco Bohemian Club, established in 1872 as a gentlemanly refuge from the crudities of frontier life. Initially, the club membership comprised journalists and writers and artists. That's where the Bohemian nomenclature came from, among them being Mark Twain and socialist writer Jack London. But the club was persuaded by member Ed Bosk that it needed money types to pay for better facilities. And once let into the group, the money men took over. Now, to visit the Bohemians, the Victorian dramatist Oscar Wilde made the comment, "I've never seen so many well-dressed, well-fed businessmen, business-like Bohemians in all my life." Bored with city life at their elegant San Francisco clubhouse, the Bohemians determined to take to the woods at an annual summer camp at the Grove. And for 100 years or more, the bohos, as they're called, have claimed the camp as merely an occasion for letting their hair down and doing some uninterrupted male bonding. Women are excluded from Bohemian Grove. Or as Grove regular President Herbert Hoover put it, the Grove is the greatest men's party on earth. Heavy drinking, frat pack-style jinks, and lavish meals and musical and theatrical entertainments are certainly core to the Grove experience, in which the members and guests sleep in some 104 log cabin camps scattered through the trees. And as a proof of the bohos' hedonistic intentions, an effigy of dull care representing the burdens of everyday life is burned every July 14th at the foot of a 40-foot concrete owl in the Grove's mock druidic cremation of Care Cemetery. The motto of the group is "Weaving spiders, come not here." Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about some of the strange things in this world. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.